Winfield State Hospital Cemetery, Winfield, Kansas. This article discusses graphic abuse, mentions sexual assault, and uses antiquated medical terms that readers may find offensive. The Winfield State Hospital Cemetery was established in 1887 when the Kansas State Asylum for Idiotic and Imbecile Youth in Lawrence was moved to Winfield. The institution went by several names over its 116-year lifespan, including the State School for Feeble-Minded Youth, the State Training School, and the Winfield State Hospital and Training Center. One goal of the institution was for individuals to leave the school able to care for themselves and to engage in some kind of useful employment, but the institution did very little actual rehabilitation. Hundreds of people died at Winfield State Hospital between 1887 and 1997 and were buried here. Winfield State Hospital became known nationwide for the cruel treatment of its inmates, mostly thanks to Superintendent Dr. Frank Hoyt Pilcher, proponent of forced sterilization or eugenics as treatment for the, quote, feeble-minded. Dr. Pilcher was an early adopter of eugenics, and his actions at Winfield State Hospital gained him a national and favorable reputation among the entire medical profession. Eugenics at Winfield State Hospital. Between 1913 and 1961, forced sterilization of individuals with disabilities was legal in Kansas. But 2 decades before forced sterilization was written into law, inmates at Winfield State Hospital were unwillingly subjected to the practice by Dr. F. Hoyt Pilcher. Dr. Pilcher was a medical doctor in nearby New Salem and a recent graduate of Ellsworth Medical College in St. Joseph, Missouri, when he was appointed superintendent of Winfield State Hospital. He was active in populist political circles, and his friend and Kansas populist governor Lorenzo Llewellyn appointed him to the position. The Populist Party made a splash in the 1892 election, and some thought Pilcher's appointment in 1893 was purely political and just another way the populist revolt was advocating for and spreading one of their ideas: better genetics through eugenics. Right before Pilcher's appointment, Dr. Isaac Kerwin addressed the Association of Medical Officers of American Institutions for Idiotic and Feeble-Minded Persons about surgery for the relief of idiotic conditions, and stated, "Whose state shall be the first to legitimize oophorectomy and orchitomia for the relief and cure of radical depravity." He was a vocal advocate for eugenics, and his literature was widely distributed. Dr. Pilcher answered Kerwin's question by performing scores of castrations and sterilizations on children in Kansas, trailblazing the way for Kansas's participation in the American eugenics movement. The operating rooms at Winfield State Hospital, where forced castration and sterilization occurred, were once considered the hospital's pride. Dr. Pilcher served 2 scandal-filled terms, first from 1893 to 1895, and then again from 1897 to 1899. He personally castrated or sterilized any patient that he deemed a confirmed masturbator.
Mutilation by the wholesale practiced at the asylum. 11 of the unfortunate children victims of the knife, the populist idea of reform fully developed. Castration, a great saving of expense for attendants. The Bird and Eagle, September 1st, 1894.
His predecessor had controlled the nameless habit of masturbation with straitjackets and constant observation, but Dr. Pilcher believed that the self-abuse caused insanity, and he used medical methods to treat it. He castrated so many boys and men that other doctors began to call the procedure Pilcherizing.
I believe that we ought to make a united effort to have laws passed that would regulate the marriage of mental, moral, and physical degenerates. But I will say that we ought to begin with the mental degenerates, and I believe we can do it in a way that would be practical. I do not think a law could be passed that would warrant Pilcherizing a man because someone called him a fool. But we should be reasonable in this matter, and we, I believe, are coming to it. Dr. Lewis, Proceedings of the Kansas Medical Society, 1899.
The number of pilcherizations personally performed by Dr. Pilcher at Winfield State Hospital varies by source. Some say he castrated at least 58 boys and sterilized as many as 150 girls during his short time at Winfield State Hospital. Others say he was biased toward boys and amputated the testicles of 44 males and performed hysterectomies on just 14 girls. These procedures were often performed without parental consent. Sometimes children would escape from the institution and tell others what happened to them, and Pilcher would preemptively warn the public of the ridiculous stories they might tell. The stories told were of abuse, torture, and neglect of care, and they were true. In addition to reports of abuse and neglect, the number of children that died during Pilcher's tenure at Winfield State Hospital skyrocketed from previous years.
Die like sheep. 16% of the imbecile asylum inmates have died this year under Dr. Pilcher's management, only 2% under his predecessor. Manifest unfitness of the present manager of institution. The governor called on to remove Dr. Pilcher. The Topeka Journal, August 30th, 1894.
Pilcher was also very publicly accused of sexual assault by different inmates and at least one employee. He said the employee was just angry and the inmates were insane, and a state investigation determined there was no evidence to support the allegations. The editors who printed the story were arrested for publishing a libelous article. The charges were later dropped.
Mrs. John Murray says, I am the baker at the State Imbecile School northeast of the city and have been about 2.5 months. Alice, whose surname I do not remember, who is about 17 years old and very bright, came to me about 2.5 weeks after I went to work at the asylum and said, You are a mother and I am alone and helpless, and I come to you for advice. Dr. Pilcher got me in his office and locked the door and pulled me down on his lap, kissed me and took liberties with my person. He told me if I would be good to him that he would be good to me and get me jewelry, etc., and wanted to know if I ever loved any other man better than him. She mentioned several incidents that had taken place and that they had continued for over 2 months, and that he gave her medicine which made her crazy and she could not take it. Winfield Courier, October 12, 1893.
At least 656 inmates at Winfield State Hospital endured forced medical castration or sterilization from 1893 to 1960 for the purpose of making, quote, fitter families. Others later became heavily involved in the Kansas eugenics movement, but Dr. Pilcher paved their way. After leaving Winfield State Hospital, Dr. Pilcher opened his own practice at the corner of 10th and Manning with his young second wife, Dr. Belle Page Pilcher. The Helen Lucille Pilcher Home Hospital, named for his late first wife, was an absolutely private sanitarium that performed electric shock therapy and operations for abdominal troubles and diseases of the rectum and genital organs, so often repugnant to sensitive persons. He also served as Cowley County's appointed physician and health officer for a period, allowing him to advocate for eugenics throughout the county. Dr. Pilcher got really sick in 1907, and for about a year, he sought relief from various natural springs. Then in January 1908, he had what resembled a paralytic stroke that effectively ended his career. He sold the hospital later that year and spent the next 7 years slowly dying in Eureka Springs. 1 month before Dr. Pilcher died in 1913, the Kansas legislature passed an act to prevent the procreation of habitual criminals, idiots, epileptics, imbeciles, and insane, legalizing eugenics for anyone declared to fall into those categories. Today, Dr. Pilcher is memorialized by some as one of the best surgeons in southwestern Kansas, who had phenomenal success in his treatment of all nervous, sexual, and private diseases. Others remember him for the brutal and abusive medical practices he forced on a vulnerable community, making Kansas an early adopter of the American eugenics movement.
Dr. F. H. Pilcher died in Arkansas the other day. Dr. Pilcher was once in charge of the asylum for the feeble-minded at Winfield and made a nationwide reputation by sterilizing the inmates in order to cure them. Greenleaf Sentinel, May 8, 1913.
Dr. Pilcher was buried at Union Graham Cemetery in Winfield with his mother and wives in a family plot. There is no big Pilcher family stone, just crooked footstones with first names only in an overgrown and unkempt plot. Forced sterilization was just one of the abuses that inmates at Winfield State Hospital endured, and Dr. Pilcher is only one part of the institution's dark history. Some try to paint a pretty picture of the hospital and its service to the community, but the stories of neglect and torture in different medical and non-medical forms that leaked to the public until the institution was closed for good in the 1990s tell a different story.
Repeated abuses seen at Winfield Hospital. The grim chapters of conditions that led to the February 18th decertification of Winfield State Hospital are slowly coming to light as reports filed by state and federal officials are made public. The following incidents were drawn from a 129-page report explaining the corrective actions ordered by the State Welfare Department. An employee reported having seen a resident hit, kicked, and kneed in the stomach and chest by another employee while in the bathroom of a hospital unit. 2 employees also confirmed having seen staff members throw footballs at residents, apparently for fun. The first employee added that he was told hitting residents was permissible as long as the cool staff was around. It wasn't unusual for a particular employee to hit a resident wearing a chest protector in the chest, knocking him to the floor, sometimes striking his head on the floor. The employee advised, "You can really have fun with this one." The Parsons, Sunday, April 9th, 1987.
Grave markers at Winfield State Hospital. Most individuals with grave markers at the Winfield State Hospital Cemetery lived here during the 67 years that forced sterilizations were performed, and many endured the abuses that were reported and unreported. Kansas didn't start keeping death records until 1911, so individuals who died here prior to that date, including those who died under Dr. Pilcher's watch, do not have a grave marker.